to illuminate the often unseen mental health challenges faced by first responders, police officers, firefighters, paramedics, and 911 dispatchers by sharing their stories, fostering understanding, and promoting resources for support and healing. We aim to break down stigma, advocate for improved mental health services within the first responder community, and inspire hope and resilience. This is the Weight We Carry podcast.
What's going on, guys? It's Bart with the Weight We Carry podcast, and today my wife is here with us, Brittany, and we are so honored to have, my former EMT instructor from a long, long time ago, paramedic, instructor, firefighter, Lynn Bourchier. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm absolutely amazing. I'm so happy to finally have you on. You're basically the beginning of my EMS career. You know, you started and you instructed me, and look where we are today. So thanks so much for being on.
She put up with you.
I'm a little concerned about how many the word long he kept repeating, like long time ago.
In a galaxy far, far away. So Lynn, if you would, could you give a little bit further detailed information about yourself, and we'll get it going.
Sure. I hate introducing myself, but I'll see. So, as Bart said, my name is Lynn. It has been a long time. Started out really pretty much out of high school. Did a little bit of college. That wasn't like the greatest life choice at the moment. So I went into the Air Force, spent 6 years in the Air Force as an aeromedical evacuation technician. And when I came out of the Air Force, I only really did it because my mom was having a lot of health problems at the time. And I knew if I'd re-enlisted, then I was going back overseas. So I wanted to stay home. And then from the job I was doing in the Air Force, it was a natural transition into EMS. And I had been a volunteer at McAllis, as a matter of fact, prior to enlisting. So it was an easy transition, right? So then I was stuck, right? Then I was there forever. And then eventually moved, to a couple of different services. Never really left the area per se. Joined the fire department old, like I was old when I joined the fire department. Like I was going to die during some of the testing. Like it was bad. But I stayed there like just short of 20 years until my body said yeah, that's enough. And in the meantime, I became an instructor, and that has solely been the thing that I absolutely love to do. Still love to do it, and I have a class I lead down at the EMT class. Trying to get my toe kind of back into the medic programs as I have time. And I currently I work in the emergency department at a hospital doing mental health crisis response for patients that come in crisis. So that's pretty much my life in a nutshell.
And such an important synopsis of what we're going to talk about, because like I said, you were my very beginning of my EMS career. You were my EMT instructor, along with some other fantastic people that I'm not going to mention. I don't know if they wouldn't be mentioned, but I just thank you for that, because without being in that class, I would have never been where we're at today, and I would have probably never met my wife. And just things happen for a reason. It happens for a reason, and I'm really excited to have you on, because seriously, thank you. EMS definitely molds you in a way. It changes you for good and worse, I think. But it changes you, and it's such a small. Either way, EMS is such a large community, but such a small community at the same time, and it's really cool what we do. So, rock and roll. Thank you again, Lynn. So Lynn, you did grow up in Pittsburgh and had a difficult family dynamic. How do you think your upbringing shaped your resilience and your approach to public safety?
I've thought a lot about that question. And my family dynamic was different. If I actually try to break it down, there was no like abuse. There was nothing. I think it was, in a way, a loving environment. It just wasn't shown. Other people talk about, oh yeah, I should sit on my dad's lap and he'd read me a book, and like none of that happened in my house, But I mean, there weren't bad things, but we weren't a real, even to this day, as old as I am, I'm kind of not a huggy person because I was not raised that way, and it just wasn't shown. Like emotions were something that keep crying and I'll give you something to cry about, kind of thing. And, that kind of thing. But, like my mom was my dad's second marriage. So he was a bit older than she was, and, a Navy veteran, from World War II. And he was really the suck it up, kind of guy, and with zero room for mistakes.
Mm.
So I blame him for the fact that I'm a ridiculous perfectionist, and always have, which at times isn't bad, but
Sure.
yeah, I mean, there were just some things that were, just like not tolerated, but it was just, it was different. Like my mom, I think, would have been probably more open and more loving. Her mom, my grandmother lived with us as long as I can ever remember. And she was the only grandparent that I ever knew. Like my dad apparently had cut ties with his parents for many years and never even had the opportunity to meet them. So it was different, but I said it wasn't terrible. Like I can't say, there was no abuse, there was no nothing like that. It just was not an openly loving kind of dynamic.
So you did mention your father was a World War II veteran, but he did die by suicide when you were 14 years old.
Mhm.
How did that loss impact you, especially as you later faced trauma in your career?
I mean, I don't even know I realized that, it was like shocking at the time. But when you're a 14-year-old kid, like, all I kind of realized was, like, holy crap, like dad's not coming home. What are you talking about? So many things changed in such a short period of time after that happened. And we just kind of went with it, and I was originally, at that point in time, I was raised Catholic, and so this was back in the I'll date myself big time here, early 80s when that happened. Actually, I take that back. Would have been the 70s when that happened. So, being the family of someone who died by suicide in the Catholic Church in the 70s, there was not exactly a lot of communication about it. It was considered this, major like mortal sin, and, like all the whispering and, the stuff that went on, kind of about that. So it certainly wasn't something you talked about. Certainly something you didn't get any help with, either through the Catholic, school or, the church or anything like that.
So you performed CPR for the first time at 16 years old on your own aunt, who unfortunately did not survive. How did that moment affect you, and did it play a role in the decision to pursue EMS?
It might have. She was my favorite aunt too. Like she was my favorite aunt ever. She was my grandma's sister, and Aunt Betty was her name. And she would come out to our house. We'd go and we'd pick her up every holiday. So she was a staple, like at our house for holidays. Super crazy, nice lady. And yeah, one Easter, as a matter of fact, it was Easter Sunday, and we had got her like on Friday. She had stayed the weekend. She had gotten into the car. We were like literally going to take her home, and her head slumped back and she like died, like right there. And so yeah, getting her even out of the car was a challenge. My CPR card was ridiculously new, and wow, like she's not a mannequin. So then the fuck, since I was right there, at the time, God, that ambulance took a long time to get there. Like when you're right there and the phone call's only being made. But yeah, I mean, it was truly, it was truly sad. I mean, I did the best I could do at the time. Obviously I wish it would have worked, and I always felt guilty about that, because again, and I will touch on this a lot as we go through here, I'm sure today. When you take a CPR class, it sounds like everybody always lives, right? I wasn't taught that, yeah, this isn't going to work, But my mom had a lot more to do with me going into EMS. She was definitely the rationale and the reasons behind I did what I did.
What was it like being a female paramedic at the time when the field was largely male dominated?
Thinking back on it, it was probably awful. Like seriously, it didn't seem quite that bad at the time, but it was tough. And the shame of it is it's still tough depending on where you are. And you don't have to get much further spread out of like Allegheny County to find that there's still a lot of old school thinking there. You had to work harder. You had to be more successful. You had to really think about when you were going to call for help because, would you get, a lot of ribbing? Would you get picked on later, for calling for help? Oh, well, guy could have done that. Okay. And I mean, don't show emotion because, well, you're crying because you're a girl, things like that. So yeah, there was definitely, and it's like leadership positions were tough to ever get, competing with, the guys all the time. And I mean, I worked with some amazing partners, both male and female, and they were super. But it was tough, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to you with that too. I joined the fire department, and at the time, I think there's only one other female in Ross Township that was a
Mhm.
firefighter. So having to prove myself to these guys to
Mhm.
show them that I was there for the right reason and,
Right.
that I could be right next to them. But
Uh-huh.
I'd get so mad at myself because I'm so competitive. And
Uh-huh.
if I couldn't lift that dummy and take it up the stairs faster than them, then
Yep.
I would just be devastated. I'd get so mad. But yeah, it's a good competition, but it's hard at the same time.
Yep.
So you served in the Air Force as an aeromedical evacuation technician. Can you describe that role and how it prepared you for the career ahead?
So, in a nutshell, an AET position is you're part of a critical care transport team, like the nurses and all they're your officers. Well, I was enlisted, so I worked my way up to crew chief at one point with because of rank. You're part of a critical care transport team, so like basically like a medical tech kind of thing, and all we did was transports, mostly back and forth across the ocean of critically injured, any, basically rank of, or any branch of service member, but particularly Air Force that were ill or injured or, whatever that needed to come back to the States. So, and calling for, backup at 35,000 feet really isn't a thing. And then it can take a while to get there. So, we always had to be prepared. We would prepare, and we'd brief, for every patient and comb through their charts and just make sure that we pretty much tried to anticipate any, thing that could possibly happen mid-flight and make sure that we were, staffed, equipped, and ready to handle it. And that definitely, plays into my level of perfectionism. And the attention to detail, is crazy, and I love that. So I've never lost that. I'm one of the pickiest people you'll probably ever meet, but we had to, for the sake of the folks that we were bringing home.
Look how perfectly I turned out, though. So, I mean,
Absolutely.
hey, so Lynn, you experienced countless critical incidents from suicides to fatal accidents to mass casualty events like U.S. Airways Flight 427. Are there any particular calls that still stay with you to this day?
Wow, there are a ton of calls that stay with me to this day. And it's weird because, like, I'll go for months or years without thinking of something. And then all of a sudden, for like some ridiculous, I don't even know what reason it is, some random thing will pop into my head. And I'll be like, holy shit. And I've already figured out it's okay to swear a little bit on here because, again,
Sure.
after Holly, man, it's all good. But and sometimes it's just like, I'll be like driving down the road, and pass a street or, pass a house, and think, oh man, wow, I was there the night that happened, things like that. And it's that for me, the hardest thing is to figure out the why behind something. And it definitely contributes to me driving myself crazy. Because like people tell me all the time, well, it's just going to happen. Well, I want to know why. Tell me why it's going to happen, because if I can make sense of it, then it's kind of okay. I can accept it more and I can deal with it better. But there are so many calls. There was a crash that I didn't drive on fortunately was on a road I had to drive a lot. I didn't drive on the road for over 3 years. Because I literally could not turn down the road. And I would think about it and I'd be like, nope, not today. And I'd go the other way, So finally I did, and I thought, this is ridiculous. Like, you're an idiot, you're going to drive this road today. And I did, and I survived, obviously, but I mean, it was tough, just things like that.
So we know way back in the day, we did touch upon this briefly, but what was the culture like around mental health and EMS? Were there any resources available, or was it all about toughing it out or suck it up, buttercup, that sort of mentality?
Well, if I remembered a lot of the culture, you don't, because probably of the alcohol that was involved. And that was what we did. We went out to the bar, and you didn't really talk about it in the station. You just came back from a bad call and you like cleaned stuff up and you just like went on. And one of my first recollections of really any kind of mental health support, and I'm going to drop her name and I don't care, because she's absolutely one of the most wonderful people I've ever known in my life, and I miss seeing her on the helicopter. And I was with McCandless. We had a murder suicide, broad daylight, in a shopping center parking lot. And needless to say, this was not something that was run of the mill for us. And both patients ended up going to Allegheny General, and one had gone by helicopter. And Karen Glass was one of the flight nurses that day. And she corralled us, 2 crews worth of us, and she put us in a room and she made us sit there, really until we found the outcome, of the one patient. And she came in and she talked, a bit, and it was kind of a really quick diffusing, like immediately after the call, but it helped. I mean, she made some sense out of what happened. She was able to tell us even just what had happened in the OR. And the answers that we had never ever gotten before that. And it's probably my first actual recollection of anything supportive after a call.
So you did mention after a particularly bad call, a supervisor told you, and I quote, "I'm not worried about you because you're strong."
Yep.
How did statements like that affect your willingness to reach out for help?
Oh, that did me in right there. And that was actually my boss. Like, it was, unfortunately back in the days where you had like, volunteer people, that got appointed, into boss positions that had other jobs outside of EMS, and, kind of no clue, really what their employees, their full-time folks were actually going through. And yeah, I mean, I distinctly remember it was a pediatric call. And it ended up being a trauma arrest. And we'd all gotten back to the station, and I was in the laundry room folding towels, probably because I wanted to be alone, and no one else would do the laundry. So I was in there folding towels, and he came walking through and like really seriously looked at me and said, because he had heard the call, and said, "Hey, I'm not really worried about you because you're strong, but we probably ought to get somebody for these other folks to talk to." And I was like, all right, cool.
Hmm.
And I mean, right there, I mean, I was done. I'm like, well, all right. So then am I going to just turn around and say, well, yeah, sorry, I'm not really strong? Well, no, because that's not me. And yeah, I mean, I was done. I was like, well, cool. So don't ever say that you're not, kind of thing. It was a message that was driven home clear as day.
At what point did you start noticing signs of PTSD in yourself? Were there any early symptoms you ignored or didn't recognize at first?
Yeah, wow. I probably didn't realize it way before. I did have some issues, a lot of issues actually. The same crash that prevented me from driving down the street for 3 years. And I was actually with the fire department on that one. There was entrapment, there were dead bodies, so we had really long exposure. We were there forever that night. And whatever, back to work, EMS the next day, a couple days, 2 weeks or so later, I was in trouble. And I didn't really understand why. Like, I didn't really know what was going on, but like, I knew something was wrong. I was just absolutely, I couldn't sleep. Like, everything annoyed me, and I just literally couldn't think straight. And the only way I can describe it is, and I've said this to numerous people, is it literally felt like I was hanging off the edge of a cliff by one hand, and I knew that sooner or later it was going to be easier to let go than it was to climb back up. So, and again, this is a ways back. So I won't mention this person's name because I'm not sure how she would feel about it, but she was absolutely incredible. She worked in passive and ER at the time, and I mean, I knew we said hi to each other, whatever. But we were our friends, I was like, hey, whatever. So this was back in the days of like the old like answering machines and stuff, right? So, and ready for this? Get ready. A phone book that I looked up her number in.
What is that?
What's that?
Easy, you two. So, so I looked up her phone number, and I can't believe she's probably like really mad at me that day, because she probably had like 5 hang up calls on her answering machine, because I couldn't do it. Like, I literally couldn't do it. It was the hardest thing in my life. Okay. Finally, I left a message. Finally. And fortunately, she had the wherewithal to probably recognize that, wow, this is really out of character. What the hell's going on? And literally called me back like that day. That evening, we met for coffee, and it was a 3-hour coffee visit, and she nailed the problem right off the bat. Like, she had known about the incident, and she was like, well, I'll tell you why you're having these problems. And I'm like, okay, all related back to that call. And like, as I've kind of found out over the years working with people, it wasn't just that one call. Like, it was a cumulative explosion. And that call was simply like the last, rock that like broke the whole thing. So, and that was, I mean, wow, that was years ago, years and years ago, and it was, I mean, when I ran, before I actually even moved out to Butler County, again, laugh, I know, because you guys probably won't even remember this. You don't even understand that there were such things. But when Route 28 between like Etna and the city, or between Shaler and that area, there was no dividing wall. And I ran my first with the fire company. I was actually with Shalerville Fire Department, and the absolutely hellacious head-on crashes we would have down there, just one fatal after another, multiple fatalities. I mean, it was ridiculous, and we just went home, and just kept going. And I was crazy young. Like, I was like a brand new paramedic during some of those, and there was like nothing. So it was so ridiculously cumulative over the years. And that one call, they say that one's going to get you sooner or later, no matter how tough you think you are, or, how long you've been doing it. Man, that one was it. That literally kicked my feet right out from under me. And I was desperate. And I think she realized that. I was desperate for help at that point because I did not know what was happening, and I knew I couldn't fix it.
That's kind of what we hear with, everyone we're talking to. It's that build up. And then you have that one last one that you're just like, nope, this is it. This is what broke me. This is where I need the help. I think in a couple, 2 weeks or something, we might be going to a school to talk to a public safety class. And I just think it's so important at that, right at the start, because I thought I was invincible at a young age. These calls didn't bother me. And it's not till later in life that here they are peeking their head and bothering me now. And you don't think about that when you're young. So I'm so excited to hopefully go talk to these students and give them that base of, hey, you're just starting out, but you need to put your mental health first and learn what to do with it, and learn your signs and symptoms, and learn who you can go talk to, and just how to deal with it and not let it build up before it gets too late.
Right. And the tough part, I think, with that is you have to kind of come up with a little bit of a delicate balance of, keep them wanting to go into the field, but yet educate them, that bad things happen, and that it's not all glamorous and glorious,
Yeah.
So that's the tough part, even facing like an EMT class and stuff now. So it's trying to get it out there and get that education fed into the program, but yet not like crush, their excitement at the same time.
Yeah. So you faced some incredibly difficult moments in your career, in your personal life. Can you share what those challenges felt like at their worst and what helped you get through them?
Wow. I don't know that I got through them really well, but okay. I mean, so I forgot about that question. That one's tough.
It's a pretty loaded question.
It is pretty loaded, actually. I mean, in a way though, what's life without challenges, truthfully, probably one of the worst parts of it all is, and the people that I think we don't look out for sometimes, are the folks that are going home alone, and don't have someone there to talk to. So dealing with things by yourself, is incredibly difficult. Getting out, getting trapped in your own head. It can be a very hard place to get out of. So I mean, I found things to do alone, to try to deal with things. Walking was always amazing before, like, my joints decided to rebel completely, thanks to fire and EMS, but I would walk and walk and walk and walk with headphones on and music blaring in my ears, because music is an amazing escape. and some of them you can't, when I really, really, really can't get my head straight and thoughts are just like kind of going crazy. I like to go to the shooting range, and it's funny because, people always joke around, it'll be like, oh yeah, you just saw someone's face on that target and, blah, 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 you were blasting them away. And I'm not going to say that maybe once or twice that wasn't the case, but, I said, again, I'm a perfectionist, right? So I don't want to not do well when I'm there. Okay. So, what I found to be the most therapeutic is, in order to shoot well, you can't think of anything else at the moment. Like, you have to 100% totally focus on what you're doing. Do that for an hour, and I'd walk out and I'd be like, wow, okay, maybe that's not so tough after all. I can go ahead and I can do this, or I can do that, or this makes sense now. And I think it was something that actually kind of happened accidentally, but, just different ways of dealing with things, again, mostly on my own. Because, I wasn't one of the ones going home to a family. I was one of the ones going home by myself, with, on a good day, a pet to talk to when I got there. And that can be really tough.
Looking back, do you think there were warning signs that others could have noticed? What should leaders and colleagues do by what should leaders and colleagues be looking out for?
There were a shit ton of signs. There's no doubt in my mind. But I mean, I didn't realize it. Okay. And I think it's really hard to see in yourself until it gets to an awful point, right? And yeah, I mean, anyone in a supervisory position, they need to be watching. They need to be like thinking about, like, where's this person come from? How long have they been doing this job? How long have we been short-staffed, and how long have they been working a ridiculous amount of hours, not only in a week, but maybe in a row? And that was certainly an accumulation effect. And what's their behavior like? What is that change in their behavior? When they're usually, a lot of times laughing, carrying on, whatever, kind of having a good time, are they kind of snapping, faster than they used to? Do they seem to be angrier? Any of those even subtle changes in behavior, instead of being, addressed in a disciplinary way, should be being addressed in a mental health way first, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I mean, now that I look back and, I can have that, kind of, 20/20 hindsight, right? Holy shit, were there the signs? And I mean, I didn't realize anything was wrong. I just thought, oh, I'm just tired. Like, I work a lot, oh yeah, whatever. It was bad. It was bad well before, I ever actually realized it.
I think we all, any one of us that works in emergency services, I went through it. There was definitely periods when I was still probably about 5-6 years in, and then I started to go through paramedic class and everything, and it was bad. I was snapping and irritable, and then I had this one here beside me call me out. So, and that's the thing. Like you said, I was lucky enough to have someone here to actually understood the job and to come home to. And I couldn't imagine, not having a family or something to come home to actually be able to somewhat decompress. You don't want to trauma dump on everyone, but I mean, we all need someone to talk to, especially working these types of jobs.
For sure.
So, Lynn, you did reach out for help by emailing a wellness professional, but you sat on that email for weeks before sending it in. What really caused you to push the button to send it?
And she still gives me shit about that because I did tell her about that. So again, I won't mention any names, but I actually, I knew of this person through a different organization that I volunteer with. And she's one of the wellness coordinators, and kind of like going through the whole like COVID thing. No teams ever got together, in person. So it was on like a lot of like Zoom calls or, like Teams calls, whatever we used at the time, with her. And I mean, she always had like some like really cool stuff to say and, whatever. And I was like, yeah, she sounds all right, whatever. I got to the point where absolute desperation. I mean, not only was I hanging over that cliff by one hand, I mean, I'm pretty sure I was down to like fingers at that point. And it had to end. Like, I needed it to stop. Period. End of story. And even at that point, I was recognizing, man, I was so freaking like angry, like the littlest thing. Like, even at home, like I get so mad at myself, and I'd be like, what the hell are you doing? Like, what is wrong with you? I just said that. What is wrong with you? Why is this stupid shit like bothering you? And settle the hell down, and literally having really not so friendly talks with myself. But it didn't help, not sleeping. I had a shit ton of symptoms. It was unbelievable. So man, I got to talk to somebody. Like finally, like I need this. I need to figure out what's going on. And the timing, I should probably preface this with the timing. I'd been out of EMS a couple of years. I mean, I was working at the hospital, and I'm like, why? Why am I having all these stupid issues? Like, this is all EMS bullshit. Like, I left that behind, and whatnot. And man, don't be stupid. Like it was all related. It was totally related. But I didn't understand that. And I had no idea. So yeah, I typed this email. I didn't even know her phone number. I typed this email and I sat on it probably a good 2 weeks and thought, yeah, I don't know, man, I don't know. Maybe I should talk to someone. No, I don't want to talk to that person. I don't want to talk to this person. Like there's nobody in the world I wanted to talk to. Like I didn't trust anybody. Like seriously, nobody. Right. And so one day I hit send out of literal desperation. I was done. I'm like, well, here goes nothing, whatever. And she, again, she knew of me, from the organization and calls we've been on together, whatever. I think she recognized, like maybe I better answer this pretty quickly, so she actually called me. We talked for a bit on the phone, and then we met for like another one of those like 3, 4-hour coffee things. We met at a Panera, and she at some point in time during that day, she told me that day that she was pretty much 100% sure that I wasn't going to show up that day. And I told her that I was pretty sure I wasn't going to show up that day either, but I did. Again, probably one of the most gutsiest things I think I've ever done. And we had an incredibly like amazing initial very long talk, and she was able to kind of wrap it all together, for me. And, yeah, I mean, I went from EMS dealing with like, one patient at a time for a relatively short period of time to, yeah, now I'm in the emergency department. All I see are people in crisis, and I spend sometimes hours with them. And sometimes I
Yeah.
have more than one at a time. I might have 3 or 4 at a time, who knows? And I'm going along thinking chapter closed, no, no. It was dredging up everything in my mind, and I just had not seen that. And it was causing me to be thinking back on a lot of things, remember a lot of things. And even I'd love to say that my job only involves adults, but it does not. It involves kids, and those are the hardest days at work. But yeah, it was probably connecting me back with some stuff from my childhood that I didn't even know was a problem.
Yeah.
And the very first thing that she did that day over that very long coffee meeting was help me make sense out of why things were happening that that were happening. And that was absolutely huge. I mean, just absolutely huge. I mean, it took my desperation level down to, almost 0 at that point because I could understand, I was like, holy shit, man, that makes sense as to why, this is happening. But yeah, it was a great intro, and it was tough to press that button, boy.
I'm sure.
And that was rough.
So, as I see, that it has really changed your perspective on reaching out for mental health and the support system that surrounds it. So, for someone listening who's struggling but's afraid to reach out for help, what would you say to them?
I would tell them, obviously, the canned answer is don't be afraid to reach out, but find someone that you can talk to. And one of the things that I've learned is that they don't have to be in public safety. That was another one of the things that I've learned, dealing with this partner. She's actually, she's become a very good friend. There's no doubt that we've become pretty good friends throughout this whole thing. And she's just crazy supportive. A lot of what happens to us in EMS or fire, any of the public safeties actually, is really grief and trauma related, is unresolved, grief. I mean, you feel bad when someone dies. You feel bad when a call doesn't go well, when the outcome isn't what we hope. But we don't address that as grief, and years of, unresolved grief and exposure to trauma, is ridiculous. Find someone who can relate even to that, is fine, because they're going to be able to, kind of make everything fall together, But our biggest thing I mean, even though we always teach, reach out for help, ask for help, whatever, I've kind of shifted that focus a little bit, actually a lot, to ask someone if they're okay. Because I know from experience that making that phone call, pressing that send button for that email took me way too long to work up to. And it literally took the most courage I think I've ever had in my life. And it is a very, very scary thing to do. Had anyone walked up to me at some point in time and said, hey, come on, let's chat, are you okay? Man, that dam probably would have burst open and that person would have regretted ever asking me that question. But it's so much easier if somebody opens that door a little bit for you. And then it's like, okay to answer that question, right? Versus walk around with everybody thinking and or telling you, oh yeah, you're strong, you're good, blah, blah, blah. Who the hell asked for help then? So, like I said, and some people think that, well, it has to be, someone from public safety. It really doesn't. If you can find someone in public safety, that's great. I mean, that would probably be the ultimate, but just find somebody who understands the feelings, the emotions behind what we do. Not necessarily the calls themselves. The graphics sometimes are important, but normally it's the outcomes, that leave us with the unresolved, things that we just move on from. And that's the stuff that needs addressed also, big time. So I don't know if that answered your question. Maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you've been teaching for 25 years now. How do you incorporate mental health education into your training?
That is tough. And it's still tough. So, I mean, we routinely, with instructor and other people, we routinely kind of, make fun of it. I don't care what level. I don't care whether you pick up an EMT book, a medic book, or an AMT book. I don't care where you read. It's always in chapter 2. It's always in the chapter titled Workforce Safety and, Wellness. And you cover the paragraph and a half on mental health. The second or third night of class, when all of your students are still standing there wide-eyed looking at you like, oh my God, what am I doing here? So probably not a great time, to be getting through to them. So I cover that part because it's going to be on their first test. But as the class goes on, I've made it a very pointed, piece to have actual like discussions about mental health. And especially before they go out on their patient contacts. I mean, I think that's a great time to do it. I can't guarantee, like what you're going to see. I've had students go out and, have 10 patient contacts where, they took the nice little old lady, to the hospital, or whatever. And I've had students go out and their very first patient contact was a DOA or a level 1 trauma, and how do you prepare them for that? I mean, they're still in class, right? So that's a great time to start having the conversations, and letting them know, about, some resources. And number one, I mean, fall back on me, fall back on your instructor, 110%, and it has paid off a little bit. I did have a kid come back to me 2 or 3 classes ago now, and he stayed after class one night. And he's like, "Hey, can I ask you something?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And he's like, "Well, I got this buddy, and his buddy is a vet." And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you were talking the other night in class," and I'm like, "Uh-oh," right? But he said, "You were saying watch out for, different behaviors, and if somebody stops kind of doing what they were doing." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "So what's going on?" And like his buddy, like I was getting sick in the pit of my stomach listening to him talk about his buddy, because I thought, man, this dude's going to kill himself. Like there is no doubt in my mind, right? And I told him, I said, "You need to go." I said, "Go now." I said, "Don't wait. Don't go tomorrow. Don't go, go now." I said, "Go to his house, knock on the door. If he doesn't answer the phone, knock, kick the door in. I don't care what you got to do." I said, Your buddy needs help." I said, "And don't hesitate to call 911, if you have to." So he comes back to class a couple days later and he's like, "Hey," he said, "thanks." He said, "I took my buddy to go get some help. He was really in trouble." And I was like, you know, and I thought, you know what, that's one right there, like made it all worth it. A student that was actually paid attention, and, although it didn't pertain to a call, it didn't pertain to whatever, it pertained to saving someone's life. and it gave him the ammunition and the knowledge that he needed to recognize that there's a problem. And I mean, if we can get that incorporated into enough classes, and teach folks what to look for, so they'll start, looking out for their coworkers and their families and their friends. And I mean, it's tough to find a starting point. It really is. And it's sometimes hard conversations to have, but they need to be had. I mean, as you guys know, from even just from doing this.
So you now lead the Butler County CISM team, critical incident stress management. How does that help first responders?
And I don't know if I lead I guess, I don't know. As a team coordinator, I'm the one that gets woken up at 4 a.m. by the 911 center. So that may be all my title really means. But, I'm the one that they call, which is fine. I don't mind that for a second. That's exactly what I'm there for. But yeah, basically, when we do get a request for a deployment, it's up to me to get the team out the door. And we are a 12-member team, and we're very small, but we're very mighty, and we get the job done. So I absolutely love my team members. I am not physically or mentally capable of going out on every deployment. And there are some that I will run from like the other direction and think, oh, hell no, I can't go there. I can't talk about this. And I'm so incredibly fortunate that I have the members on our team that I can send out there and know that they're going to do the great job. And I'm going to be like, y'all are going, I'm sitting at home tonight. Call me and let me know how it went. And I have total faith that that's going to go well. So we go out when we get calls for any type of whatever anybody decides is a critical event. And that definition is so crazy to pinpoint down. What's a critical event to me might not be to my partner, or to them. And I'd be like, I've seen that 1,000 times. I don't know why you're upset, whatever. So many differing, opinions in the way that experiences stick with people. So we have the formal, the actual debriefings, diffusings, that kind of thing that we'll go out, and we just start a conversation. And I probably could get in trouble for saying this on a podcast because I don't know who else is going to hear this, but the structure of those, they are pretty structured by the book. And then there's us, right? I like to lead them as conversations. Um, we typically don't do the like around the room thing. We just try to open up conversation, and where it goes, it goes. And there are times that they are very mentally exhausting for us as team members. I know, because we're allowing people to go down a pathway and then trying to bring them back, trying to help them make sense of it. And believe me, we're not always sure what's going to happen. I'll be like, wow, that took a twist, right? But what we find time and time and time again, we get called for one incident. And during the course of the night, the course of the conversation, they start bringing in other calls because it's cumulative. It is cumulative. And it's not like, wow, this one thing put them over the edge. So if they want to start talking about other things, we let them. We incorporate that. We do a high number of actual one-on-ones. A lot of times, I'll get a phone call from somebody that said, hey, we were on this call, and I got this new guy, and he kind of seems to be struggling. And I'll be like, yeah, sure, give me his phone number, and tell him that somebody's from the team's going to be reaching out to him. And then I just kind of pick a person off the team who I think is going to be the best one to talk with that person. And a one-on-one phone conversation, a one-on-one, coffee meeting, things like that. But we've reached a lot of people. We're starting to get some calls back to services in Butler County. And again, the dynamic in Butler County is interesting. Southern Butler County, because we border Allegheny, has a lot of that kind of same mentality, although surprising how closed off at least a couple of the services can still be. Up north of the city, still gets a little rural Butler County-ish. Macho, male-dominated fire department, things like that. Guys that, at one point in time, you'd have thought, man, they ain't talking about nothing, right? I mean, they just, they left their tractor outside and, man, it's all like He-Man kind of stuff. We're breaking through that slowly but surely. I've been quite happy and surprised at some of the places that we've gotten called and how well some of our conversations have gone. So, we're trying to break through it. There's still the stigma, the myths are out there. It is so hard to break through, sometimes. But it's slowly but surely, and I love it when I get the text messages, the next day or 2 days later, hey, thanks, thank your team for us, I talked with some of my guys and they're really doing a lot better. And it's great. That is the only reward that I need or that my team needs at that point. So, to really know that we got out there and hopefully, mitigated some symptoms.
I think that's where the importance of what you said earlier is, check in, check often.
Uh-huh.
The more you check in, one point they'll be like, yeah, actually, I do need to talk about this. And they just don't let it go.
Right. And we leave them with that too, like check on your people, check on that guy that's hanging out at the station or that guy that all of a sudden stops hanging out at the station, and ask, don't wait for them to ask for help. I will preach that now probably till the day I die. Don't wait for somebody to ask for help. If you notice anything, man, go to them, open that door, just that tiny little bit, and then step back because it just may come flowing through, which is exactly what you want to happen.
Absolutely. If you can change one thing about how public safety agencies handle mental health, what would it be?
I would probably go back to the part about pay attention to your employees and watch for those behaviors. Not everything is a disciplinary matter. It could be, a referral, to mental health. Sit down and have that hard conversation, take that time. Point out to them maybe what your concern is for that employee. And get them help versus, a disciplinary thing, because they're likely to bounce back, well, and they may not even know there's an issue. That's the key. It is tough to recognize, until it gets so bad. Like I said, when I'm standing in my kitchen thinking, what is wrong with you? I mean, I gotta tell you, there are some packages at my house that didn't stand a chance of survival because they wouldn't open when I wanted them to open. Man, don't be a box that won't open for me because it was bad, right? I mean, I would destroy you, okay? But I could literally like feel the anger. And I'd be like, what is wrong with you? Get out a damn pair of scissors, do this. So watch for those kind of behaviors, things that are just so like exaggerated that they don't make sense, you know, and pull that person aside, and say, hey, first of all, just, talk to them, point out that there's a problem, and, get them to talk to someone. I mean, a lot of places have EAPs, some don't, which is fine. The EAP thing is still a little hit and miss, because there's always the question of, will my employer find out I talked to someone, whatever. Is it going to show up on, the insurance thing, find out who your local CISM team is. Have them, reach out to that person. Like I said, I mean, with us, we're super informal, super. I'll arrange, a cup of coffee with anybody. We'll go sit, one-on-one, two-on-one, talk to somebody at their station. And we have referrals that, won't cost you anything. That if they need referred, further like to mental health and stuff, but that stuff is there if someone looks for it. And all they have to do is reach out. The days of, your crews come back from the call. I know people are short staffed. I know services are busy, but you know what? Take them out of service, give them a little bit of time to regroup, just little things like that. Call your mutual aid company. They probably already heard your shitty call in the first place. They're probably on the same radio. I mean, come on, right? Just call them up and say, hey, can you move over? Can you cover for us for 2 hours? I want to take my crew out of service, get them something to eat, give them a little bit of downtime. We're going to just sit around and chat, whatever. Little things like that. And would make a huge difference, in contributing that mental health. Bring people in for Con Ed. Find people, that they're going to just come in and just have conversations. They don't have to be structured, oh, we're going to come in and lecture you about, your mental health. Just find people, to come in on a service on a training night, and just, again, open up conversation. I mean, and it's funny because you do a class like that, and the class seems kind of, formal, maybe sometimes a little bit stuffy. Hang around after the class, and everybody wants to start talking.
Yep.
As soon as, you're like, oh, okay, let's break out the refreshments, let's do whatever. And then all of a sudden there's like a line of people that want to talk to you, but it works,
It's where that structure can go way out. Let's get rid of the structure,
I
because
mean,
that's when you start having more genuine conversations. For
exactly.
sure.
Like you have to have that little bit of bravery to go, okay, now we know the train tracks are going to explode here. We just have to figure out which direction we're going to go and be a little bit willing to, go down rabbit holes. And,
Yeah.
but I mean, it works, I mean, that's when you're giving out information, that's when the people are coming up to you that then saying the things they didn't want to say in front of the classroom full of people, and it's so, so helpful at that point. But there's a lot of things that people can do, again, they just have to take the time. They have to read their people,
Yeah.
and take care of them better.
And I think we all know is we've gathered now that there's so many resources out there. It's just you need to know where to look, or people you just have to start that to look it up on Google. We've had many people say that those resources are there. Some of us we don't look for them. So, what's one thing that you wish more people understood about the mental health struggles of first responders?
Coming from a non-first responder perspective?
I think, how about both? How about both sides of it?
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess they're kind of maybe similar. But I mean, the folks that are not involved in public safety, I think they don't, some to point, don't have a clue. I mean, I think the people that, like legitimately say, well, there's no way I could ever do what you do. I don't know how I do what I did either, truthfully, but you kind of do it in the moment. Just and again, they see what's on TV, they see what's talked about, what's glamorized, all this kind of stuff. And then when something doesn't go well, they see all the negativity again on TV, in the news, things like that. Look at your first responders like they're people. We're just people. Like don't please don't. I really hate it when people, don't ever use the term hero to me, because there are so many people that I look up to as heroes that I don't even come close to, And I just did my job. I got myself in it. I did my job. I did it to the best of my ability, and that was it. It was no big deal, and don't, because as soon as you do that, what do they not want to do? Right? You don't want to admit weakness. Okay. So, as soon as somebody looks at you and brands you, with that kind of a thing, you're like, "Oh, okay, cool, I'm a hero. Shut up. All good." So I mean, yeah, it's nice to be appreciated. Sure, absolutely. But we're people, and with emotions that come along with the job. And oftentimes we go from that call to call to call to call, and we don't acknowledge those emotions. We don't, give them that time to understand that there's grief. So that when you lose that patient or you have that horrible call, that it is okay to take that as a loss.
Yeah.
And you all know that we don't accept loss well. I mean, come on, who does?
Nope.
Especially in public safety, right? We want to win every game for sure. But when it doesn't work, we need that outlet, and remind them that, like, I know, I hate to say, not all things are in our control. Okay. Again, we want to be in charge of everything, right? We want to, I'm going to control every single, no, well, sorry, you lose,
You
and
lose.
you
We
can't,
lose miserably.
and sometimes you just get your ass kicked, and,
Yeah.
a lot of times the fate is decided before we even get there. And there's try as we may, we're not going to change that outcome. And sometimes I think that's something else we need to be addressing in classes. I mean, me collectively, as instructors, I feel bad. Like I personally feel bad. I mean, I feel like I've done like probably, thousands of students somewhat of a disservice over the years. And I'm really working hard to try to change that. By glamorizing or not just kind of being real with them.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gone and I've taught classes when I could barely think straight because I'd had a horrible call or a horrible, day in EMS or whatever. And I've gone and taught a class and like thought and walked out later going, man, I hope I talked about what I was supposed to talk about because like I'm a mess right now. And that's just ridiculous, to do. But there's a lot of things we can fix, and it needs to start in the classroom. It needs to start with their education.
Yeah. Maybe sometime we could, I don't know how that would work out, but maybe stop in one of your classes. I don't know if that would work out or not, but I know
Maybe.
someone.
Maybe. I might know someone I could talk to.
I don't know if she would want you back in her class.
Man, wouldn't that be like old home week, huh?
Oh man,
Like,
I
I'd
don't even
sit
know
your
if I can
ass
get
up
down on
front
the
and
floor
everything.
and do CPR anymore, man. Oh
Man,
jeez.
man, I'd sit your ass right up front and like make you feel at home.
Little dunce cap on.
Hey, I'm ready. Let's do it.
I love it.
So, Lynn, we are coming to an end here, and this is going to be the last question for you. And I think it's a pretty good one. So you can marinate on it a little bit if you'd like. So if you could go back and talk to your younger self, not so long ago, just starting out in EMS, what advice would you give yourself?
I would have I actually have thought about the answer to this one. I would have a really long, hard conversation with myself, and it would start out with, listen, idiot, don't do a whole lot of things that I did. The whole asking for help thing, okay, well, we've pretty much covered that. But I got sucked in, like most people do, like a lot of people did, right? But just, like want to keep running and doing shifts, this was great, and hey, I'm going to work that holiday because I get paid, time and a half and all this kind of stuff. I have a lot of regrets because I did things like that. A lot of, if you have the option to spend a holiday with your family instead of working, let somebody else work. I missed holidays and I didn't realize that it was going to be the last opportunity I had to see that relative because they died that next spring, or things like that, and your family still needs to come first. Your life needs to come first. And, it was tough. And that way you don't drive yourself into the ground either. There's a lot of ways that, we burn out because we don't stop. Yeah, we probably need money, whatever, but you can miss a shift. I don't care if, somebody's short staffed, I mean, guess what? Somebody's going to take your place no matter what. You could get hurt tomorrow and someone will take your place. Now, take your damn vacation time. Organizations budget for people to be on vacation. It's in their financials every year. Anybody that knows how to do a budget, anybody who knows how to run even the smallest company, budgets for vacation time. Take your damn time. You've earned it. You're going to get paid for it. And, for the love of God, please do something other than, public safety while you're on vacation. Find a hobby, go fishing. That's one of the best things ever. Just go sit by the water, and if you catch a fish, great. If you don't, great. Who cares? Clear your head. But find something. It is not all about the job. Don't let the job define you. Biggest mistake ever. And I read somewhere where have an exit strategy. If it gets to be too much, if for some reason, heaven forbid you get hurt, you decide, have an exit strategy. Know where you're going to go. I passed up a lot of opportunities. I had opportunities to get out of EMS, or at least go down a different pathway a lot earlier than I did. I was like, oh no, I'm still having fun being a medic. Oh, I passed up that teaching opportunity or, whatever. Yeah, I'm still having fun on the trucks. Well, then like all of a sudden you're like, shit, where do I go now?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So yeah, I said, I thought about that question, and boy, I'd sit myself down and we would have one heck of a long talk right now, about things. And, it's all about, just your life should be outside of your job, no matter what. And you never know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen to you tomorrow. You know what's going to happen to your, closest relatives tomorrow, your family members tomorrow. Don't miss those opportunities if you have a chance to take them. If you're doing a rotation, it's your turn to work Christmas, great. But if it's not, don't freaking offer. I mean, let the person whose turn it is, things like that. For the sake of like your life, not just your mental health, but your life. So I hope that one answered okay, because I guess that one
on.
wasn't that hard for me to come up with that answer. Because when I first read that your email, I thought, man, that conversation was starting with, listen, asshole. I was like, I got that one.
Yeah. And that's, that was the conversation I had with myself over time. That's why I got off the trucks and then went to dispatch.
Mhm.
And then I missed it. and even now I'm like, I have people like, do you miss working EMS? I'm like, I do miss taking care of people in that in-person way because I love doing it, but I don't miss the job, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. And it's funny because, I don't miss EMS as much as I miss the fire department.
Really?
Yeah, because I really enjoyed that. And just a little bit of a backstory. The real reason I joined the fire department in the first place, was because I was renting, a room, um, in a house for a while where I was living, and that house caught fire, and
Oh,
burned to the
wow.
ground. And slowly but surely, it led to me like I was just going to join the fire department, and to this day, these people, suck me in. I was just going to join the fire department to answer QRS calls. That's all I was going to do, right? That's all I was going to do. Well, you're a medic, we could really, okay, fine, fine, fine. Okay, I'll join the fire department. I'll just answer, medical calls. That's all I'm going to do. Dude, somehow I ended up like freaking firefighter one and like driving and operating and, running into fires and, like what the hell, right? But, again, um, I mean, yeah, okay, it's exciting. There's no doubt. Your adrenaline is charged. Okay. I am terrified of fire, like terrified. Like, in their right mind shouldn't be, right? Um, some of my favorite calls, um, one in particular I'll never forget. It was a structure fire that we had. We actually mutual aid assisted into an area. It was 2 nights before Christmas. And one of the most satisfying things that I personally got to do with my crew that night was carry out the undamaged Christmas presents from under the tree, get them out of the house. We actually put them in our engine because we didn't have anywhere else to put them. But we just to be able to save something for that family,
Yeah.
so a lot of things like that. Those things that people don't think about. Well, you just want to run into a burning building. I'm an idiot, man. I'm terrified. Like I don't want to die that way, right? Come on, right? But the way that fire company responded that night, and I standing back as the observer, the absolutely in shock, of what the hell is happening, and watching those folks work, was absolutely amazing, and yeah, I took my firefighter one test when I was in my 40s. Dude, I couldn't move for 3 days. 0 out of 10, do not recommend. Please do it when you're younger. The whole audience out there, please do it when you're younger. Like, I seriously literally laid on my couch and took Advil for 3 days. It was awful. Don't.
It's like now I'm at the point is if I sleep wrong, I can't move for 3 days.
Seriously. Yeah, 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 like steps hurt, like, I don't know
Yeah.
what to tell you.
It's like, what is wrong here?
Yeah, honestly.
Well, Lynn, seriously, it's been a few years since we've seen each other. We ran into each other up north, I think, at a mutual friend's house a while back.
That was in Adams Township Park for a birthday party, man. I remember.
Yep. That's been the last time I saw you.
Yep.
I always will mention your name and I'm like, yeah, Lynn. It was awesome. It was awesome having you as a mentor and an instructor. And if that would have never happened, we would never be where we're at now.
Yeah.
So again, I really thank you for helping me start my career into public safety. You've done a service to all the students that you've taught. So again, we commend you for that, and we thank you for doing that and dedicating your life to public safety. Honestly, that's what you've done. So thanks for sitting down with us, opening up with us, and that's about all we got.
Well, no, I really appreciate this opportunity. I just said, yeah, I was a little nervous, but I mean, it's things you got to put out there,
It is.
and, and people need to know that anyone and everyone can be affected by this stuff. You guys are doing an absolutely phenomenal thing. I mean, I got to tell you that I'm personally a little bit jealous that I never thought about it myself, but that's okay. Yeah, I mean, what a hell of a way to get that word out. You never know who's struggling. They seem okay from the outside, but man, they're hurting on the inside. I mean, I have bad days. I have a lot of bad days, and it's a constant struggle. I mean, there's demons in there that I can keep at bay, and sometimes they raise their ugly heads. I have a ways to go. Like, there's no doubt about it. I was talking to my friend of mine the other night, and I said, I kind of miss the old me.
Yeah.
I said, like, I can smile and joke around, and God knows, sarcasm is probably one of my top 5, personality traits. But I miss getting excited about things because I don't, and I'll be like, yeah, okay, that sounds good. And that's like it. Like, I'm either like neutral or I'm sad. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
kind of want to swing that the other way again, but I really don't know how to do that, so I got a ways to go, so there's no doubt. And coming on here and admitting that, God, that took a lot of nerve, by the way. But it needs done. It needs done. And I thought, you know what, if I'm going to stand in front of a classroom and I'm going to talk to my students and I'm going to preach this shit, then I'm going to do it. I'm going to lay it out there. And what best than, someone like you, who, many moons ago. And you did have a really good instructional team, by the way. I'm not going to mention their names either, but
Hell yeah,
still
we
kick ass.
did.
They
I
still
mean,
kick ass. They're still out there. They're still
legends.
doing it, and they are still kicking ass. Some
Freaking
phenomenal
legends.
people that taught me a lot about teaching along the way, and I will never not give the credit for that.
Well, Lynn, after we get off of here, I'd like to pass along some resources that I think could really help you, because I went through a therapy session with a particular group, and it works. I promise you it works.
Uh-huh.
So we'll pass that along to you, and you can pass along to any other public safety people, because it is, if I wouldn't have reached out for help, we wouldn't be here.
Uh-huh.
And it takes a hell of a lot of courage to do so. And I thank you for doing that for us, because it does. We wanted to start that conversation and open the dialogue with everyone else, because it is it's one of the most important things in public safety is our mental health and our well-being, because if you don't have that, you're not going to have providers. So
Absolutely.
we need to take care of each other.
Absolutely. And this whole, this provider suicide thing, I did a lot of research on that. I'm actually putting together a Con Ed class that I hope to get approved. So I'm doing a lot of research into that and a lot of the statistics and the actual like physical part of it. We've got to change those numbers. We have to stop that.
Yeah.
And 90% of it is caused by cumulative stress. And we got to get in there and we got to find a way. We have to address this.
Yes, we do.
Or it's not going to get any better.
Let's
But
kill
you
that
guys are
stigma.
doing an amazing thing. This is like one of the greatest ideas ever, and the reach that you're getting and the people that are like approaching you about wanting to come on here is amazing too. So
We're blown away by it. It's kind of, we say that imposter syndrome is like, why, how, and why are we here? And and it started with just taking a step. And we're like, let's do this, because
Absolutely.
it's so important. But if anyone would like to be on the show, just like Lynn was, hit us up at twwcpodcast@proton.me. Reach out to us, guys, because we're going to continue this conversation. It's so important. And here we are. Let's keep it going. We love you guys. Again, thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Britt, as the best half here, Britt. But we love you guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you later, okay? Have a good one.
Yeah.